All right, this is part 2 of my video response to Rabbi Slifkin. His book, The Challenge of Creation, posits the compatibility of belief in the Hebrew Torah and belief in evolution. For this reason, ultra-Orthodox Jews have banned his book. We're talking about the what you would call the extreme sects. Although I think that more modern, I would say that the Reformed and the conservative Jews are probably okay with it. His intended audience would be Orthodox Jews who, again, would be questioning their faith based on a belief in evolution that is not going to change. And so that's what's interesting about the book. It's not intended for those Orthodox Jews, probably a majority, who remain literal creationists, and it's also not intended for atheists. It's probably also not intended for Gentiles, although I think that a Gentile reader definitely would probably find it enlightening if they have a sufficient science background, and perhaps if they too are devout members of their particular religion who are questioning whether their religion is compatible with evolution, particularly, let's say, a Christian or possibly even somebody of another faith whose religion would be based more or less on the Hebrew Tanakh. So, given its intended audience, I think that it is I think it's an interesting book. First of all, why? Why is it an interesting book? For one thing, the idea of why I believe in God and evolution is not only not novel, it's almost a stereotype at this point. Ever since I was a kid, I would hear, well, I believe in God and I also believe in evolution. It's not a big deal in American society to believe in both. Contrary to what might be found on the polar extremes of either those who consider themselves very religious or very secular, most educated religious people do believe in evolution, including in the intelligent design movement. Ben Stein believes in evolution. He won't say it, but I'm sure he does. And the reason I know that he does is because he's an educated person, he's very knowledgeable, and he believes in evolution. Both Ben Stein and Richard Dawkins believe in evolution. I don't care what you might think about Ben Stein. I know he believes in evolution, okay? Because I know what an intelligent person believes. The question between the two of them is, does Ben Stein believe the universe is simply an accident? Versus that there is a higher power. Okay, so it's on that note that I'm going to address the book, because it's on that note that the book goes beyond the usual, yeah, you can believe in evolution and creation at the same time kinds of reconciliation arguments, to some very profound philosophical questions around, okay, how can you believe in both evolution and creation at the same time? Do you go with the idea that each day is billions of years? Do you go with the idea that the evolutionary process cannot be explained but by irreducible complexity? Do you go with, which would probably be the intelligent design argument, okay? And they do believe in evolution. I don't care what they may tell their fundamentalist subscribers or followers, they do believe in evolution. And to be honest with you, all right, leaving that aside, Sarah Palin believes in evolution. George W. Bush believes in evolution. Dick Cheney definitely believes in evolution because he's a social Darwinist, and they believe in evolution. But that's a side point. Rabbi Slifkin is definitely well above any of those other people that I'm discussing, in the sense that he gets into some of the questions around how randomness, in other words, reducible complexity, a complexity that can be explained, can itself add up to a larger plan. Now, the question of randomness. I think the rabbi is too quick to dismiss some of the ideas from string theory just because they haven't been proven. I mean, lots of ideas in cosmology aren't directly provable or falsifiable. They're still viable theories. But I think that it is an interesting point. Now, again, I'm getting into the idea of an infinite number of universes and the idea of a Krauss argument, or the idea of a probability argument based on infinity. I would say personally that a probability argument based on infinity would be metaphysical. That is, it is not a naturalistic argument to say there's an infinite number of universes, therefore every possible universe would have to come about. That's not naturalism. That is an assumption that first of all, even invoking infinity would be an assumption based on a metaphysical invocation of infinity. But second of all, a probability argument based on infinity is mathematically undefined. So to say, well, we can explain how randomness forms order based on, well, okay, randomness formed order, order formed life, life formed consciousness, but that's just in this universe. Other ones could be completely void of life. Well, for one thing, we don't know under what conditions life as a self-organizing principle would evolve. We have carbon-based life here on this planet. There might be another universe that has a whole different set of laws of physics that might evolve consciousness. We don't know, okay? We might have a universe that is both biocentric and what would be the term? You know, the mini-universe model, okay? We might be able to reconcile the two. We just don't know. So he is a bit quick to maybe dismiss the multiple universes idea. I also think he's a bit quick to jump to anthropocentric assumptions about man being elevated above the rest of nature. Okay, so some criticisms. But where the book definitely hits the spot with me, and again, we can, the book is in multiple different levels. There's a book that, first of all, addresses the question of the old Earth, leaving evolution, chapters in the book that address the question of the old Earth, leaving aside evolution. And the book makes it very clear that ideas that the universe could be a lot older than thousands of years old go back centuries before Darwin, that there were interpretations of the old Earth that would stem from the thoughts of educated people during the Middle Ages and during ancient times. The influence of Aristotle. Now, Aristotle was not a creationist. He did believe in a prime mover, but his prime mover was someone who was an impersonal god, and there was no moment of creation for Aristotle. So Maimonides in Guide to the Perplexed addressed the question of how do you reconcile Aristotle and the Jewish thought that Maimonides profoundly believed in. So the book then goes along and addresses evidence for an ancient universe. Rabbi Slifkin makes it very, very clear that we live in an ancient universe. There's no room for debate. There's no debate in the science classroom about whether the universe is billions of years old or thousands of years old. We can debate and the idea of purpose versus randomness, okay? And I think that's a debate that should be done in a far more elevated level than just to assume that purpose would be something we would recognize as purpose. Therefore, we don't have something we recognize as purpose. Therefore, the universe isn't designed pwn. I mean, that's a nonsense argument you find on YouTube and among skeptical philosophers that doesn't follow. And then eventually the book gets to evolution as a concept, although he leaves open the idea that there may be other mechanisms for evolution other than just natural selection or sexual selection. And he discusses a little bit about neo-Darwinism versus Gold. And he makes a very excellent point about common ancestry. And that is that the evidence for common ancestry can be found. Oh, one excellent point he makes before I get to that is that any strict creationist argument would have to address the multiple strata. Why it is that if humans and dinosaurs lived at the same time, why we have humans in one geological strata and dinosaurs at another geological strata. Yeah, there might be a human who slipped down and then they're found together with dinosaurs, but for the most part, you have very strict layering. You also have, second of all, the evidence for common ancestry would then have to be found in cladistics, in analyzing the similarities between organs that may be in different animals with very vastly different purposes that have a lot of commonalities. And he asks the question, why would God design the universe to look like evolution created it? Would that be to fool us? That would not be in the character of an infinite God. And so in a sense, Rabbi Slifkin addresses the question both ways and writes a very profound and very thought-provoking book. I don't agree with it in all respects, but it was a fascinating read. Thank you.